Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football early Sunday morning. Another commitment out of the transfer portal from Mike Elko and Texas A&M as former Washington Nickelback Jordan Shaw commits to Texas A&M. This one kind of flew under the radar. Jordan Shaw, I think, a really good football player, was on campus for Texas A&M on Saturday. I didn't even know he was on campus. And then you wake up Sunday morning. He's committed and signed with Texas A&M. And I think the first thing you want to talk about is I think this is an immediate upgrade from what Texas A&M was getting out of the nickel cornerback play in 2024. And you look at Jaden Hill and you look at Jordan Shaw and just say it's hard to argue that Jordan Shaw is just not a better football player. And so you look at this get for Texas A&M and say, one, I think you're adding a really good football player who's only going to be a redshirt sophomore. And so there's 3 years of eligibility remaining for Jordan Shaw. But I also think you're immediately upgrading a position in the secondary. And for any Texas A&M fan that listened to the Mike Elko press conference after the bowl game against USC, it was very clear that Mike Elko wanted to make some upgrades into the secondary heading into 2025. Jordan Shaw, to me, is that guy. I want to get into, one, what I like about Jordan Shaw, talk about what this Texas A&M secondary is going to look like in 2025, and I think take an optimistic approach and talk about why we think this secondary can get much better going into 2025, because I do think there are some reasons that it can. Now, before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Texas A&M fans, a lot of which who've been rocking with the boys really for the last 12 months since Mike Elko has taken over this program. What he's done on the recruiting trail, what he's done in the transfer portal, it's been really fun breaking down, and y'all have shown a ton of support. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Jordan Shaw. Right now, let's start with why I think this is just a simple, pure upgrade for Texas A&M at nickel. You look at Jaden Hill's numbers last year, and this is not meant to be we're going to steamroll Jaden Hill, but it was pretty, you kind of knew too. Jaden Hill coming from Florida, he was going to be a fifth-year senior, and there was a lot of sample size of him being, just kind of an average nickel at Florida. We knew we weren't getting an all-conference guy. We certainly knew we weren't getting an all-American. We were getting a veteran nickel that could play a lot of reliable snaps for Texas A&M. And he was solid, but wasn't great, right? Faced 39 targets, gave up 28 catches. That's a 72% completion percentage. He missed 18% of his tackles. And playing that nickel spot, you got to be able to tackle. What the nickel corner is essentially just the third linebacker that you're adding. Instead of having a third linebacker on the football field, you're having another defensive back on the field. So you can have a little bit more coverage ability. But if you're going to be essentially replacing that third linebacker, you damn well better be a tackler, and you dang well better come up and run support. And Jaden Hill just struggled tackling in space, and quite frankly, we knew he struggled tackling in space because he struggled for the last couple of years at Florida as well. My favorite thing about Jordan Shaw here is Jordan Shaw was a redshirt freshman for Washington in 2024, played over 500 snaps. He only missed 9% of his tackles. I mean, that missed tackle rate is getting cut in half with Jordan Shaw joining this Texas A&M roster. And I think secondly in coverage, faced 36 targets, only gave up 22 catches, 61% completion percentage for a nickel corner. That's a dang good number. So he tackles in space. He can support the run. He's probably better in coverage. And I think most importantly, he's a young player. He's only going into year 3 of his college football career. And so I look at it, and why I think that's kind of an important conversation is you look at Jaden Hill last year, a fourth-year guy going into his fifth year. You probably knew he wasn't going to take a massive jump. You very rarely see guys take massive jumps from year 4 to year 5. By that time, you kind of know who you are as a football player. When you're going from year 2 to year 3, like, you're still a young college football player that's probably still getting better at the sport. And so I look at Jordan Shaw and say, I think he was just a purely better nickel than Jaden Hill last year at Washington. There's a chance he's getting better as he goes in to the 2025 season. And then you look at the secondary, and this is an interesting talking point, and some Texas A&M fans might disagree with me, but this is kind of my take on it. The struggles that Texas A&M saw in the secondary to me were more of a, chemistry, continuity, new defensive staff, new head coach, a ton of new football players in the back end, as opposed to talent. I look at Willie, he's going to be playing in the NFL at some point. I look at Des Ricks, he's going to be an NFL guy at some point. I mean, you even look at a guy like Julian Humphrey coming from Georgia, that's a really talented cornerback. You guess what I'm trying to get at is the talent was not the problem for Texas A&M in 2024, at least from my opinion. And Mike Elko even said as much in the press conference. We just couldn't play any zone coverage because our spacing and our chemistry in the back end was just not good enough. And so I think you're retaining a lot of guys that are going into year two of this defense that have all played together a lot. It's probably going to get better in 2025. That back end, it's a lot of chemistry. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of understanding of, hey, what's my depth in this coverage? What can I trust for my safety over the top of me? I think just because they've all played together a lot over this year, and yes, there were some growing pains. I think because of the chemistry and continuity that you're getting back in 2025, I think it automatically just makes this unit better. Because I look at the talent and say that the talent wasn't the problem, right? You all know I'm a Michigan fan. We wanted our quarterback play to be better. It just wasn't going to get better because we didn't have the guy. We didn't have a good quarterback on the roster. For Texas A&M, it's different. I think it struggled because it was pretty much every single face that hadn't played football together since before the 2024 season. And then they're rolling into 2024, a ton of new faces with a brand new coaching staff. It just didn't come together as quickly as I think a lot of Texas A&M fans and certainly Mike Elko wanted. I don't think that's a reason it can't be much better in the 2025 year. You see defenses year two in the same scheme kind of take that step. You saw it with Kirby Smart. You saw it certainly with Michigan with all the new defensive coordinators we had. I think you saw it with Coach Knowles at Ohio State. There's a lot of evidence that year two in a defense makes the defense better. I think you can get that for Texas A&M specifically in the secondary. And you start looking at the personnel, Will Lee, Des Ricks, Julian Humphrey, feel pretty good about it. Okay, the nickel, I'm not sure. Jaden Hill's gone, right? He was a redshirt senior. Tyree Chappelle was a senior, but he only played 2 games due to injury. Is he back? I tried to do a little research before I got on. I couldn't find any information on him. If Tyreek Chappelle's back, you feel really good about the nickel. I think Jordan Shaw comes in and starts because I think he's a really good football player. But getting Tyreek Chappelle back for one more year, that certainly means something for Texas A&M. And then the safeties, Bryce Anderson, Ratcliffe, Dalton Brooks, guys that we feel pretty good about. The X factor is probably Terry Bussey. Where does Terry Bussey play for Texas A&M? Now, my personal take is that Terry Bussey should stay on offense. I think quite frankly, I just think he's too good on offense and too special and too dynamic with the football in his hands not to play offense. Now, that could look a little different. Maybe it's, hey, we're going to move you to corner because that's where we think, or in the set, wherever he wants to play in the secondary, say, we think you can be the best football player possible as a secondary guy, but we're still going to give you some reps on offense. We'll sprinkle you in some opportunities because at the end of the day, we want to have the football in your hands. I'm interested to see what happens with Terry Bussey because I think the general consensus when he committed to Texas A&M was, all right, you're going to play in the secondary. I think why he played on offense more was like Texas A&M just didn't have enough difference makers on offense last year, and so Terry Bussey was one of those guys. Casey Concepcion, Micah Hudson, Mario Craver. All of a sudden, you're looking at Texas A&M and saying, we think we have enough difference makers on offense. Maybe you can move Terry Bussey back to a spot that you expected him to play coming out of high school. We'll see how that works out. But I think Jordan Shaw, really big commitment. I think it's a clear upgrade. You're also getting some youth, a guy with 3 years left of eligibility. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.